So here's what's going on with the Los Angeles Lakers right now, and things are definitely heating up. According to reports floating around, especially from reputable sources close to the organization, Lakers have zeroed in on a very specific target for this roster. They want a point-of-fatic defender, someone who can lock down opposing guards, chase wings around screens, and really bring that defensive intensity at the perimeter. And let's be honest, that's something this team has desperately needed, not just this offseason, but going all the way back to last season too. Anyone who watched the Lakers get cooked by quicker guards on the perimeter knows exactly what I'm talking about. The Lakers were constantly scrambling to rotate over, helping on drives, and that opened up the floor for opponents in ways that made the defense look softer than it should have been. Now here's the interesting part: the Lakers don't necessarily need to trade for this kind of player. They could actually snag someone for free, and I'm talking about guys like Josh Okogie. Think about that for a second. A guy like Okogie, who's a proven defensive presence available for basically nothing, that's a move that makes all the sense in the world. He brings energy, effort, and toughness. The kind of grit that doesn't always show up on the stat sheet, but makes a huge impact on the floor. Of course, I'd still like to see the Lakers make some trades to shake things up, address a few other needs, but if you can get someone like Okogie without giving up assets, that's a no-brainer. And timing is everything right now. Shake Milton is still on the roster, but we're quickly approaching that window where his contract becomes fully guaranteed. So the expectation, and this seems to be the general consensus, is that the Lakers are going to waive Shake Milton in the next few days. It just makes sense. That opens up a roster spot, gives them flexibility, and shows that they're serious about cleaning up the edges of this roster. Once that move is official, the Lakers will have an opportunity to bring in someone that directly addresses the perimeter defense. That's why names like Josh Okogie and even Marcus Smart are being floated around. Marcus Smart, if he were truly available, would be a home run defensively. It's just a matter of whether the Lakers are willing to meet the price tag that comes with a player like that. There are teams out there, like the Chicago Bulls, who are shopping players. Everyone knows the Bulls are kind of in that weird limbo stage. They're not tanking, not contending. That's usually when you see teams start to test the market, try to offload some contracts and reshuffle the deck. And when that happens, that's when smart teams like the Lakers need to be ready, because every player has a price. It's just a matter of whether the Lakers are willing to pay it and what that price looks like. From the other team's perspective, you don't want to overpay. You don't want to give up your future for a stopgap, but you also don't want to sit on your hands while other contenders get stronger. Dan Woik and Joe Vardon from The Athletic made it clear the Lakers are aware of the issue. They know perimeter defense has to improve. This isn't one of those situations where fans see the problem and the front office ignores it. Rob Pelinka has acknowledged it multiple times during off-season interviews. He's talked about the need for more athleticism on the wings and better point-of-fatic defense. They've already addressed the backup center issue to an extent, bringing in a more reliable big man. That was step one. But the defensive identity on the perimeter is still a work in progress. As for the center position, while it might not be the top priority right now, it's still on the radar. Jackson Hayes is a solid option for the regular season. He's athletic, he runs the floor, and he gives you effort. But come playoff time, we all know the intensity ramps up, and the holes in your roster get exposed real fast. If Jackson Hayes ends up having to start 15 or 20 games this season due to injuries or rest days, the Lakers will survive. But long-term, if the opportunity to upgrade is there, if someone like Nick Richards becomes available for a reasonable asking price, then you absolutely pull the trigger. Same thing with veterans like Al Horford or Nikola Vucevic. If they end up on the buyout market, the Lakers should enforce it, but they should always be ready. Still, point-of-fatic defense is priority number one. If the Lakers go into the season without solving that, it's going to be an uphill battle on that end of the floor. But if they land someone like Josh Okogie, a guy who can slot right in and handle that role, it makes a big difference. Maybe pair him with someone like DeAnthony Melton. Now you're cooking. That gives you defensive depth, that gives you options, and most importantly, it buys you time. The Lakers don't need to rush into a trade if they have short-term solutions in place. That way, when the right deal does come along, maybe involving RUI, Hachimura, Gabe Vincent, or even Dalton Knecht, you're in a better negotiating position. Teams won't see you as desperate. Let's not forget about internal improvement either. Jared Vanderbilt, for example, has been working on his three-point shot all summer. And what if it actually pays off? What if he starts hitting threes at a 37% clip? That's not an outrageous jump. That's realistic growth. And if Vanderbilt adds a consistent jumper to his elite defense suddenly, he becomes one of the most valuable threat forwards in the league. He's already got the size, the motor, and the defensive IQ. The shot is the only thing holding him back from being a legit starter every night. Personally, I'd start Vanderbilt over RUI right now. You've already got enough scoring with Austin Reeves, LeBron James, and your main big man. Whether that's Ayton or someone else, Vanderbilt gives that lineup balance, and balance is what wins in the playoffs. The Lakers have to think long-term, and they're clearly playing the waiting game with strategy. If they can patch some of these holes via free agency or the buyout market, they give themselves leverage. Now, when they talk to other teams, they're not coming from a place of need. They're coming from a place of flexibility. Hey, we'd love to trade for your guy, but we're also good riding with who we have. So either you lower your price or we walk. That's how you negotiate from strength. You don't want to be that team that everyone knows has to make a move. That's when the vultures circle. Signing someone like Josh Okogie, who by the way just shot 38% from beyond the arc last season with Phoenix, would be a huge move. And people overlook him because he's not flashy, he's not a big name. But what he brings is exactly what the Lakers need: defensive intensity, positional versatility, and improved shooting. And pairing him with LeBron and Luka, suddenly you've got something really interesting brewing. If Jared Vanderbilt improves his shot and you've got Okogie locking down opposing guards, that's a defensive wall right there. That's how you wear down opposing backcourts over the course of a series. And look, the Lakers don't have the same luxury that teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder or San Antonio Spurs have. They can't afford to make big mistakes. They don't have that bottomless pit of draft picks and young assets to fall back on. When the Lakers make a move, it has to hit. It has to be the right guy at the right time for the right price. That's why patience matters. That's why smart signings, now even small ones, matter. Because they allow you to play the long game. They let you wait for the real needle-moving trade. Let's say the Lakers do bring in Okogie and Melton. Now suddenly when a team like Miami calls and says, hey, you know what, we're willing to do this deal without taking your first-round pick, the Lakers are in position to say yes. Because they don't have to gut the roster just to survive the regular season. They can aim higher. They can make calculated bets. Maybe you do that trade involving RUI and Vincent later in the year. Maybe you don't. The point is you give yourself options, and in this league options are everything. At the same time, you keep developing the guys you already have. What if Moy Hodge becomes a real bench contributor? What if Jake LaRavia turns into the player Memphis thought he could be? What if Adri Ayton actually buys and stays healthy and gives you consistent rim protection and finishing? If all those pieces start to click, even partially, the Lakers could find themselves in the conversation for top 3 in the league. But we won't know until it happens. That's why this stage of the offseason is all about setup. Putting yourself in a position where you're ready to strike when the time is right. So yeah, this isn't about overreacting or throwing everything at one player. It's about filling the gaps, being smart, and preparing for the grind ahead. The Lakers have talent. They have a core. Now it's about surrounding that core with the right role players. And if they do that, they're going to be a real problem when the games start to matter. And here's the thing, this whole conversation about defense, patience, and roster construction, it all comes down to one core idea. The Lakers cannot afford to miss. They're not rebuilding. They're not in a let's see what happens phase. They are trying to contend. Right now, today, which means every roster spot matters. Every rotation player has to contribute. You can't waste time or minutes trying to see if a guy might work. This isn't the Thunder throwing darts at projects. This is a team led by LeBron James with a core that's built to win now. And in that kind of situation, margin for error disappears. That's why the Lakers have to be smart about who they target, how they negotiate, and when they pull the trigger. We've seen in the past how one wrong move, or even just waiting too long to make the right one, can be the difference between a deep playoff run and a first-round exit. If you're Rob Pelinka right now, you're walking a tightrope. You know you need that point-of-fatic defender, but you also know the trade market is wild. Teams are asking for a premium. Everyone wants draft picks. Everyone wants to capitalize on the Lakers' urgency. But if the front office plays this right, if they strike with purpose and patience, they could build something scary. There's a bigger strategy here too. By solving certain needs early, like bringing in a guy like Josh Okogie or even DeAnthony Melton, the Lakers can calm the waters. They don't look desperate. They shift leverage back in their favor. And that can change the tone of every negotiation going forward. Suddenly teams aren't thinking they need our guy. We can fleece them. Instead, they're wondering, Are we going to lose our chance to make a deal before the Lakers move on? That's a powerful position to be in. And don't underestimate the psychological aspect of that. The moment other teams think you've solved your needs, the trade dynamics shift. That's where Rob Pelinka and the front office can really work the phones, plant seeds, and create pressure. Maybe a team that was demanding a first-rounder last week starts softening their stance. Maybe a guy who was considered untouchable becomes available once his team hits a losing streak. The NBA is fluid. Things change fast. But you can't take advantage of that if you're boxed into a corner. You need flexibility. That's why every smart move now creates room for even smarter moves. Later, the Andre Ayton situation is a perfect example. By landing a big like that, you suddenly don't need to overpay for someone like Nick Richards. You can still like those guys. Daniel Gafford, Nick Claxton, solid options, but now the ball is in your court. Now you dictate the terms because you're no longer desperate, and it's the same thing with wings and guards. Get 1 or 2 perimeter defenders in the building, even if they're not all-stars, and suddenly you're not being strong-armed into bad trades. And who knows, maybe those guys you bring in on the margins end up being more than placeholders. Maybe Okogie keeps shooting close to 40% from 3. Maybe Jared Vanderbilt becomes a reliable floor spacer. Maybe DeAnthony Melton gives you playoff-caliber defense in 25 minutes a night. These aren't pipe dreams. These are the kinds of leaps we've seen role players make all the time, especially when playing next to stars like LeBron and Luka. Because that's the other factor that people always overlook when you play with superstars. The game gets easier, the looks get cleaner, the rotations get tighter. The pressure's off, and some players thrive in that kind of system. So imagine a scenario where Okogie is hitting shots, Vando's reliable Ayton is locked in, and your core guys, Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves, are doing their thing. All of a sudden, you're not just filling holes, you're building an identity. A defensive-minded team with length, versatility, and just enough shooting to keep defenses honest. And once that identity sets in, it changes the way every opponent prepares for you. You're no longer just a team trying to outscore people. You're a team that grinds, that wears you down, that forces turnovers and runs the break. That's when the Lakers are at their best, but the only way you get there is by making smart moves early. That's why guys like Okogie and Melton matter. That's why internal growth matters. Because every piece you can trust is one less gamble you have to make later. And let's be real, we've seen the Lakers get burned before trying to patch things up too late. You don't want to wait until February to realize your defense isn't good enough. You don't want to be scrambling at the deadline giving up picks just to fix a problem you could have addressed in July. And look, nobody's saying it's easy. The Lakers don't have unlimited resources. They don't have 5 extra first-round picks like some of these rebuilding teams. But what they do have is a very clear window. They have LeBron. They have Luka. They have a chance to win now. And you only get so many of those in the NBA. So every decision has to be made with that urgency in mind. Even a guy like Theo Maledon could be part of that conversation. He's not a headliner, but he's shown flashes. You give him the right role, the right minutes, and maybe he gives you something real. The point is the Lakers need to be exploring every angle, every cheap signing, every league standout, every veteran on the edge of a buyout. Because all it takes is 1 or 2 guys stepping up, and suddenly you're in a completely different tier as a contender. And this is why patience is a weapon, not a weakness. If the Lakers had panicked and made a deal too soon, maybe they would have overpaid. Maybe they'd be stuck with a guy who doesn't fit. But by waiting, by surveying the landscape, and by moving with intent instead of emotion, they've given themselves the chance to build something with depth and staying power. You don't just want to win a few games in the regular season. You want to be peaking in April and May. You want to be the team that no one wants to see in the second round. And to do that, you need more than just star power. You need cohesion. Now, of course, the challenge is keeping all these plates spinning. Because while you wait for the right trade, you also need to be winning games. You need to stay competitive in the West. You can't fall behind hoping a trade saves your season. That's why these free agent pickups are so important, because they buy you time without sacrificing wins. They allow you to stay afloat, to stay dangerous, while still holding your cards. For the long-term play, it's a balancing act, no doubt. But the Lakers have shown they can pull it off when the front office is locked in and the coaching staff is on the same page. That's the next step too. Making sure whoever comes and gets integrated quickly. There's no time for long adjustment periods. Guys have to know their role, buy into the system, and be ready to contribute. If they do that, the sky's the limit. Think about what this team looks like at full strength. Luka at the helm, LeBron doing LeBron things, Austin Reeves providing balance, a defensive backcourt, with Okogie or Melton and bigs like Ayton and Vanderbilt anchoring the paint. That's a lineup that can switch, that can pressure the ball, that can get out in transition. That's a team with identity and toughness. And if everyone is locked in defensively, the offense will come. That's the beauty of having stars. They generate offense even when things aren't going perfectly. You just need to make sure the defense holds up, because that's what the playoffs are all about. You can score all day in January, but in May the game slows down. Matchups matter more. Rotations shrink. You need players who can get stops, who won't get hunted, who can stay on the floor for quarters. That's where the point-o-phatic defenders come in. That's why Okogie matters. That's why Vanderbilt's growth is so critical. Because when the lights are brightest, you need guys you trust. So for the Lakers, it's all about building that trust now, getting guys into the building, seeing what you have, letting the season unfold without rushing to fix everything in one swoop. Because if you do this right, if you get the defense right, get the rotations right, get the chemistry right, then you give yourself a real shot. Not just to make the playoffs, but to do real damage once you're there. Before we continue, we ask that you leave a like and subscribe to the channel, so you won't miss any exclusive Lakers updates. Moving on, in a developing story that has the NBA world buzzing, there are growing whispers that RUI Hachimura could be on his way out of Los Angeles and landing in Chicago. The Lakers forward, who played a solid role for LA over the past seasons, is reportedly being courted by the Bulls with a potentially massive 4-year contract. While no official deal has been announced, multiple sources close to the situation suggest that talks have intensified in recent days, with Chicago looking to bolster its front court depth and add a versatile scorer to its rotation. Hachimura, known for his mid-range game and improving defensive skills, was seen as a key supporting piece during his time with the Lakers. But with LA seemingly focused on reshaping its roster and exploring other priorities this offseason, the door appears to be opening for RUI to seek a fresh start elsewhere, and Chicago may be ready to pounce. The Bulls, stuck in a prolonged period of inconsistency, are rumored to be in the market for a reliable two-way player who can contribute immediately. Hachimura checks many of those boxes. What makes this potential move even more intriguing is the reported value of the contract. Sources indicate it could be one of the more generous offers of free agency, signaling that Chicago is serious about securing Hachimura's services long-term. For a player who has yet to fully break out as a star, this would be a clear vote of confidence from a franchise looking for new direction. Of course, nothing is finalized, and in the NBA rumor mill, things can change in a heartbeat. But the idea of RUI Hachimura donning a Bulls jersey next season is gaining traction, with both teams remaining tight-lipped for now. Fans and analysts alike are left to speculate: is this just smoke, or is there real fire behind the scenes? One thing is clear: if this deal goes through, it could reshape the outlook for both franchises heading into next season. Stay tuned.